Hey everyone, I'm back, and today we're going to be talking about Return to Oz. And this movie came out in 1985, and I always thought it was going to be a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, but apparently it's not a direct sequel to that movie. It's more or less an adaptation of the book, and it's a sequel to the book of the Wizard of Oz, and trying to be a bit more accurate. And I've always heard about this movie. I never watched it. I've heard that it was supposedly very scary and unintentionally scary, is what I mean. And I was like, okay, I kind of know what I'm in for. Let's see what the movie is. And this ended up being one of the scariest movies I've seen. Unintentionally scary, that is. And I couldn't stand it. And I did see some pictures online of some certain aspects, like the pumpkin jack. I was like, okay, that's not too bad. If that's as scary as it gets, I'll be fine. Or you look at the poster and you don't really know what it's showing all too well because you haven't seen the movie yet. I was like, okay, that's fine. But when they actually show up in the movie, it's a bit more creepy because of what's kind of implied. But anyways, that's just so far, like, we're okay. It's like, if that's as bad as it gets, I think I'll be fine. It gets much worse. And I had absolutely no idea what I was going to be in for. And this movie definitely took me by surprise. All of the character designs in this movie are just awful. Even the characters that are returning, or I guess technically returning, like characters that we're like familiar with, like Lion, Scarecrow, Tin Man. They're not in the movie that much, but when we do see them, it's like, what is with this awful design? They look terrible. Like, it looks cheaper than the one from 39. Like, you can't help but compare it to The Wizard of Oz, mostly because it's a classic and iconic movie that everyone loves. And you can't help but compare it. All the effects in this movie are bad, and you could make the argument, okay, it's just the technical limitations of the time, but keep in mind, this was released 46 years after the original Wizard of Oz, and it looks worse than that movie. Like, the standard of what should be held in 1939 was not met with this movie. It just goes way below that, and it's honestly impressive that this is where we're at. So, like, we have a character named TikTok, terrible name, and I didn't care for his design, but I will say this much: he wasn't disgustingly looking as many other characters that we met up in the film. I was like, okay, this isn't a great character design, but it was the least bad out of everything we've seen up until that point. I didn't care for any of the performances. The child acting was pretty bad. I never once felt like I was watching a character. And the entire time I was wondering, why is Dorothy younger in this movie than she is in The Wizard of Oz? And that's for a couple of reasons. A, it was like something that they changed for The Wizard of Oz, and in the books, allegedly, she's supposed to be 12 years old, and they were trying to make her more accurate for this movie. But I still couldn't help but find that distracting, and this movie took place like 6 months after the events of, I guess, the original story, if that makes sense. But another thing that I want to mention is that there are characters called Wheelers in this movie, and they honestly reminded me of the antagonist characters in like Mad Max, not specifically Fury Road, just in the Mad Max movies. And it was like a mix of that between the characters in A Clockwork Orange. I was like, what are we doing here? This doesn't fit. It doesn't feel like I'm in this same universe. And I get it, things were changed because of the events of the first movie, and in between that movie and this movie, or the original story and this story. I get that things have changed, but it never once felt as though it earned that tone or it fully committed to that. And I just was confused, even from the opening shot. I was like, what is this movie supposed to be? What is it trying to be? I could never figure out what the tone was supposed to be. Like, is this supposed to be fun? Is this supposed to be scary? Is this supposed to be kind of creepy? Is this supposed to be, like, serious? Stakes are being raised? It just never could quite commit to what it wanted to be. And as a result, we just get this weird hybrid movie of just random things that are thrown into this movie, which I guess eventually we do get a story out of. And things are kind of brought up. And I was like, oh, okay, didn't exactly see that coming. But it just doesn't make for a satisfying narrative, unfortunately. And with all of my issues, I was expecting to just say, oh, this movie's probably going to be really boring. But I couldn't say this movie was boring. Not because I was consistently entertained by what I was being shown, but rather I was being horrified by what I was being shown, infuriated, or just had so much to say. I was taking so many notes. I was like, I don't have time to be bored. I have so much to say about all of these different things and why it goes wrong and every single turn. And also, one thing that kind of bugged me about the character TikTok in this movie is that you wind his like gears or whatever or thing, like you turn it once for thinking, one is for speaking, and one's for movement. I was like, oh, that's going to come into play later in the film. I wonder what's going to happen. And sure enough, what I guessed early on in the movie actually happened. And there's so many plot holes in this movie that just don't make any sense, and the antagonists of the movie, I couldn't take them seriously unironically. I was just watching them and thinking to myself, they're really creepy in ways that the film probably did not intend on being creepy. And what's really strange about this is that this movie was distributed by Disney. Like, Disney released a horror movie that was for kids. Like, it's really funny to think about it that way. Disney, they released this movie, and it's considered to be a terrible movie, really scary, and yeah, I wouldn't expect Disney to own this movie, like to be the official people to like release this. Like, when I kind of talk and think about this movie, it honestly reminds me of Son of the Mask. While I don't really know much of anything about the behind the scenes on this movie and what they were trying to go for, I do remember Son of the Mask, some of the behind the scenes stuff, and I was looking up some interviews about that movie, and they were just talking about what were we thinking because of the choices that they made on it. I'm not sure if a similar thing was done for this movie, where they release special features and are pretty open about what the overall product of the movie is. I don't know. I can't really comment on that. But if that was the case, I would be two things. A, not surprised. And B, very curious to check out as to what they would have to say about it. And even from the opening of this movie, before we even get to Oz, it's a pretty scary experience because of the images that were being shown. And it kind of just feels like The Shining in a sense early on. And we're in a mental hospital. I was like, why are we here? And I think that almost could have worked if it was just like, okay, you're just going to be medicated and just stay here until we can like figure out what's wrong. But instead they do other things, or at least that's what the movie is trying to show off. And I'm like, no. What am I supposed to feel from this? I don't know. Couldn't tell you. I don't even know where to begin with some of these things that this movie did. I did not care for any of the music in this movie. None of it was particularly memorable to me. It was all just exactly what you would expect, probably. And one difference between this movie and The Wizard of Oz, and also, I guess, Wicked, is that this movie is not a musical. So if you do decide to watch this movie, which I would highly recommend that you do not do, don't expect a musical. Just keep that in mind. And one thing that I'm surprised I didn't mention yet is that any effects work in this movie looked bad. The green screen looked bad. The stop motion animation looked terrifying and creepy and dated and bad. And the way it was used was just wrong, in my opinion. The animatronics didn't look convincing. Any and all visual effects were atrocious and just did not feel as though they were a part of the environment. And I honestly can't even think of one thing that I liked about this movie. Not one. It was a genuinely awful experience that I do not wish to come back to. It was definitely an experience. And if you want to say that I was never bored while watching it, I could say, yeah, I guess that's a positive. Sure. Would I consider this movie to be one of my least favorite movies of all time? Yeah, I probably would. Would it be in the top 10 or bottom 10, however you want to describe it or say how it is? It might be. I would have to go through that list again as to whether or not I would make that list, but wow, this was terrible. Never want to watch this again. So skip this movie if you ever come across it. Just watch any other Wizard of Oz movie. Whether or not it's attached to this timeline or not, skip it. Because it was just a film where pretty much everything just went wrong. And I guess one last thing to say about it that I haven't mentioned already is that there are parts of it where I could imagine everything working very well in a book format, but unfortunately it was just not translated very well to this film. And as a result, we have this movie. And I'm not saying that it's impossible to adapt to this stuff and make it better or good. I'm not saying it's impossible for a good movie to be made out of these ideas. I'm just saying that it's shocking that we got a movie that was this bad. Definitely not what we should have gotten. And I haven't even mentioned that this movie is directed by Walter Murch, who has directed nothing. Nothing before and nothing after. So this movie was in great hands, as you might imagine. And I think that's everything I have to say now. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Return to Oz a 1 out of 10. Thank you for watching my videos. As always, if you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and comment down below your thought of Return to Oz, and my social media links, they will all be in the description, so follow me there. And last but not least, subscribe to be a part of Foley Nation, and I'll see you when I get my next review up, and that is going to be for The Polar Express. Hopefully it's better than Return to Oz, so look forward to that, but until I get that up, thank you for watching and have a great day.